I really would like to welcome both Allan and Sheri. Together they have a little firm of their own. Let me see now if I can remember the name of it.
Political research?
Yeah, something like that. And I know you've been working together for a really long time on areas to do with the economy, politics, how the two work together, consulting on those sorts of issues. What do you think Alice's deep message is? What did she really want to get across? I mean, the title is pretty evident, but beyond that, what did she really want to get across?
Well, your opening story sets it up perfectly because she saw the problem and she wanted to get to a hopeful solution. She saw the problem before many of us in this room did, and the panel that follows has been sort of nicknamed Hope versus Doom.
Yeah.
Which path are we on? She passed away before the real doom became self-evident, but she could see the...
Well, there were many more dooms before this one, or at least they looked that way anyway.
So she saw the undertow that was building, and she was worried about democracy and whether it would survive a lack of confidence coming from the American people, because policymakers were at that period in constant gridlock, constant stalemate, issues not getting resolved, and her feeling was if we couldn't come together to solve problems, there were big problems ahead. And so I think that was one of her urgent messages. Another one, and we're glad we have Maya McGinnis here, is the deficit's too darn big.
Yeah.
And we've taken our eye off that, and if the deficit is too big for too long, big problems are coming. She passed away at a time when inflation was very low, and she wrote about that. There was a long period where we weren't really looking at the deficit in the way we're going to have to now that interest rates and inflation are back. And so she was really focused on that. But tying those two together, I think her real impetus for writing the book was the failure of the two deficit commissions she served on to get to the grand bargain that her view was that the experts, the economists and the budgeters had a solution for our deficit problem that balanced revenue increases and spending restraint, but the politicians couldn't get there. And so as long as the politicians are locked in a standoff, big problems are not getting solved, and the public can realize that. And then I've got to add one more to the list, which is the inequality issue. And her feeling was that missing the great financial collapse in 2008, 2009, but especially the Washington establishment that she was part of, and missed what happened in the recovery from that, and how unequal that was, as Amy was saying, geographically, and that for some Americans, the discussion going on in Washington right now, are we in a deficit or not? There are some people who've never not been in a deficit going all the way back to 2008.
Even right here in Washington, or should I say especially right here in Washington?
Absolutely, and she had, at the time of her passing, a real concern on her mind that an urgent message not for the American public, but for people in this room, for the economic establishment, that they'd missed something big and lost a measure of their authority because we missed both the downturn, but also the recovery and the unevenness. And she put that into a speech that she gave for the Brookings board before the 2016 election, actually before the nominating process was over. And Sheri wanted to read some of that.
Come on,
I'm so excited to read this. Yes, it's an address to the Brookings Institution Board of Directors in March of 2016. And she says, collectively, those of us who purport
Everyone hear Sheri? Yep,
Can you
can.
hear? Okay. Collectively, those of us who purport to be experts on monetary and fiscal policy and financial markets totally missed the financial catastrophe of 2008 until it was actually happening. And perhaps more surprisingly, we are now totally amazed by the angry populism of the right and the left. Where did Trump and Sanders come from? And why are people cheering them so enthusiastically? They don't really fit into our worldview. So one of the big challenges for the next 100 years at Brookings and elsewhere in the intellectual establishment is to somehow learn to listen more effectively so we won't be so surprised by reality.
You know, in my experience with Alice, while she was very receptive to other points of view, she had her own point of view. And I'm kind of wondering, how did the book writing process really work? How did the melding of melding, how did that work?
Yes. Well, we're three different people. We have our own views, and there's a tradition that I came late to, being a part of the family with Alice for only 30 years, so I was a newcomer to this, but of people speaking their minds. When we got together, we'd sit around and drink wine and have very strong views, all of us, and she enjoyed that. She didn't want everyone to agree with her. She liked the dialogue. She liked lively conversation. She'd be so excited to have been here for the panel, for sure.
This panel coming up is going to be lively conversation. We're pretty sure of it. Sid Winter is over there, and he was part of really the four of us in a process that involved fires and glasses of wine and long discussions, and we did not agree. I'm somewhat to the left of Alice. Sheri's somewhat to the left of me. And we had long debates, and these continued after Alice passed. Sheri and our process was to get into arguments about what Alice would have said, where we found gaps in the book. And most of these were resolved 2-1. I'd say Alice would never say that. Sheri would say, oh, yes, she would. And then by the time I woke up the next morning, Sheri would say, and she did, and here it is. And most of the footnotes in the book are pretty much 2-1 arguments that I lost with Sheri and Alice on the same team.
The quote boxes.
I noticed the two of you are still speaking. I think that's amazing.
We are.
Yeah. I know it's been 3 or 4 years since Alice died, but I think you started with her before that, didn't you? She knew you were going to carry on where she couldn't complete?
The further she got into her illness, the more she knew she was running out of time before she finished the book.
Yeah.
She passed it to us very near the end, but we were deeply involved in, we knew we were running out of time with her. And so we were spending an awful lot of time on Chesterfield Place, taking advantage of the time we knew we had.
I see we have 2 minutes left. So, in your own views, can we actually make consensus work the way Alice wanted it to work?
Oh, wow.
I'll take Team Hope. And that is that, first of all, there are more Americans that want to see democracy succeed and want to see us decide our differences through reasoned discourse rather than violence. And one of the points that Molly Reynolds is in the audience, and she helped us a lot with the political science parts of the book, but the progressive Democrats have never been a majority of Congress or the United States. And conservative Republicans have never been a majority of the Congress or the United States. And Trump Republicans are nowhere near a majority of...
Conservative Republicans.
Well, nowhere. Trump, unfortunately, are a majority of conservative Republicans, but not a majority of the whole. And so these majorities of the majorities are not a majority of the whole. And that is the genius of the United States. Factions can't take over. The system is strong enough so that we can get to decisions even when there are factions that want to take over.
I think that's an amazingly positive way to begin our panel discussion, where I think there will be some debates about that particular perspective. So thank you very much, Allan. Thank you, Sheila. Sheri.
Thank you so much.
Why did I say Sheila? I meant Sheri.